Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Animal Connections from Coast to Coast. I'm Mary Beth, representing the East Coast out here in North Carolina, where I'm a physio, a body worker, overall healer, a animal communicator, and a teacher. I include animal communication in my toolbox because I believe our relationships are key with our animals, and part of the basis of a relationship is understanding each other. So that's what I just love kind of digging into, seeing what our animals have to say and helping with their humans and animal understanding each other.
And I'm Denise Dunleavy, representing the West Coast out of Portland, Oregon. And I am an animal communicator, intuitive, and teacher. And my goal is really just to help people understand their animals better. And that improves their relationships and leads to more joy in life. I also love teaching animal communication classes so that people can learn to communicate with their own animals better.
Oh, I love how you mentioned about the classes, because that's one thing I've been asked is how in the world did you even get started with animal communication? Did you even know what the heck was going on? So how about we dive into that today, Denise? Did you even know what
Absolutely.
was going on, or how did you get started doing this?
Well, I did not know that animal communication was a thing. I had never heard of it until I started doing it. And I did not always know that I could talk to animals. Lots of animal communicators will say, oh, I've always been doing this since I was a kid, and animals just come up to me. And I did not have that experience. I always loved animals, but I didn't think I had anything really special about me. And I got started because I kept meeting people that told me I was psychic. And that's really what it took, was other people seeing that in me. So I just started exploring, and I took a class, a clairvoyant class. And it was that teacher that really helped push me along and said, yes, you are really doing this, and you are, you have these abilities. And I started learning with people. So that class was all reading people's energy, learning how to do energy clearings, aura clearings. And then I found a class on animal communication. So even before that had happened, I was trying to figure out a way to change my career to help animals. And I started by getting certified in animal massage. So it was the Northwest School of Animal Massage, a great program. But I did that first. And then I took this class and I thought, well, this would be a great way to kind of combine those things like you have done. And it was through doing this that the teacher really encouraged me. She did the same thing. She said, I know you're connecting to these animals. And so for me, it was really having people around me that supported me, that validated what I was doing and encouraged me to keep doing it. Also, though, having the experiences where you get a message and someone says, yes, that's exactly what my animal would say. So, um, so it was more through the practice of just actually doing it and learning is how I figured it out. How did it work for you, Mary Beth?
Very interesting. Sort of similar. Sort of similar. I love how you mention how many animal communicators will say they've always been connected with animals. And, I will be one of those. I've always grown up just absolutely loving animals, felt a certain connection with animals. But I think that connection and that kind of, yeah, I think just energetic connection is one thing. And being able to communicate with them is something totally different, because that I just only within like the past 5 years realized that that's a gift, because again, I've always felt close with animals. I've always, I'm gonna say, preferred animals to people sometimes.
Me too. Me too.
I'm definitely the one that has, oh my God, I think I have 9 animals, and everybody will say, well, how many kids do you have? I'm like, 9. Well, how old are they? I was like, well, I have 4 horses. And it was like, human children? No, no, no. Just, but again, that connection is different than communication. And my journey kind of started with healing. I've been a physical therapist since about 2005, so yeah, I'm a little old. But I've always wanted to work with the animal world. I just did not feel like vet path was right for me. I've just always loved the body, and there's something about manual therapy and how the body functions is just always felt aligned. And kind of wanting to work with animals in that sense too. One day, my dog was kind of passing. He was in the middle of transitioning, and I'd been doing a lot of the scientific stuff with him, working with the vet. And one day, I just kind of laid my hands on him, and that was my first experience in energetic healing. We'll talk about that another day, but that kind of opened the doors because I realized the power of what happened there. Once I got over the grief. And so, like you, I started just kind of exploring. And so I found I think it was on Meetup. An amazing teacher was doing a different level, kind of develop your intuition class. I've always kind of felt something going on. I've always felt, being able to understand things and being able to see things. But I felt like this class would give me more structure, and it did. We, did whole body scans. We did, I think it's called psychometries, where you hold things and you kind of give the readings about it. And part of that whole meetup group was an animal communication class. And I was so excited because I'd never done a class like that before. And it was interesting and surprising how easy the information was coming across. And like you, it took that support and that kind of, you can do this. You've always been able to do this. But it took kind of that structure to realize, not only realize what was happening, but to realize that, wait a minute, I can do this. So really through courses. And I've taken a couple of different animal communication classes. Since then, just to kind of still get in the practice and being with fellow tribe members who are also are on the animal communication journey. And I've kind of since joined a couple of different groups online because practice is key. Kind of understanding what's going on and also being able to practice, I think, is key. Because one thing I've struggled with, and I still struggle with to a point, I'd love to know your thought, is on my own animals. It's a lot harder.
I agree. It is much more difficult to talk to my animals. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is that we are so close to them and connected that our thoughts are almost intertwined. So when I try to talk to my own animals, sometimes I just can't tell if it's coming from me or from them. But also, because of that, we're emotionally involved.
Right.
So, for instance, my cat was really sick last summer, and I was so worried and so upset about it, and I did not want him to be sick. So it's hard for me to go in with an open mind and be clear. So I talk a lot about neutrality. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be neutral in order to be open and let information come in. And with our own animals, it's hard to be neutral because we love them and we're invested in the outcome. Do you have any thoughts about that?
100% agree. And I think that's what kind of even maybe not quite understand that this was something that I could do because I would hire. Oh, I don't even remember how long ago it was now, but even when I was in undergrad, I was involved in some spiritual stuff, and a friend would come over and he would give me readings on my horse at that time, and I used to think that is so cool because I can't pick up on that, but then it's interesting because those classes that I went to, it's like, wait a minute, this really is easy. So, and it kind of helped me to see the difference and why I think classes are so important. And like I mentioned, the practice is so important because it gives you the option of, like you said, being neutral because you don't know this animal, but you have someone who's able to validate the information about the animal. So it gives you a true sense of where you are.
Right. Practice is key. And I just want to introduce my little buddy. This is Declan.
Hey,
And
Declan.
he is the reason that I really uh, dove into animal communication because one time I was holding him like a baby. He was laying on his back, cradled in my arms, and I looked at him in the eyes. And I remember thinking, I feel like he's looking right into my soul.
Mm.
Like he's a very spiritual animal. And I think that helps as well too, because, well, I think that he came to show me that my purpose was to work with animals. But animals are very spiritual. So sometimes they are kind of leading us into the animal communication. I want to follow up on what you said about taking classes because I try to listen to other animal communicators, to their talks, um, classes, because I'm constantly learning.
Mhm.
They will bring up insights. They might have had a specific situation come up that I haven't encountered yet. Or I don't know, I'm constantly learning things from them. I want to share just one little example is that I listened to one and someone had a question and they said, well, can you really be an animal communicator and care about animals if you eat meat?
Mm.
And that was something I had never thought about. And they said that some animals will volunteer to be food and fuel for us or for other animals, that they come in with the purpose of knowing that that's what they're here for. And I really liked that because it wasn't something that I would have come up with on my own. And it's also, uh, they were talking about how it's different for every individual.
Mhm.
The person asking the question has said, I've tried to give up meat and it affects my health. And so I feel like that's not an option for me. And so just hearing other people's perspectives gives us more information that we can work on when we're talking to animals. One thing that somebody mentioned to me once is that it can be difficult to get a message if it's something that you've never heard of before. For instance, I don't ever try and guess names. So I like to have the name of the animal that helps me set the intention that that's who I'm connecting to. But also someone pointed out once, well, what if they have a name that you've never heard of? Or something that you didn't. I met a dog one time named Biscuit. And if I was, well, I think we talked about that before too, that if I had asked an animal their name and they said biscuit, I might not think of that as a name. So it would impede the communication. So just wanted to get back to your point of like constantly learning. Taking classes is a great way to learn and also to keep up
I
the
love
with
that.
with things that are going on.
So true. So true. Both as a medical person who I'm required to constantly take classes because, the world is ever changing. And what we know, even just from medicine, is always changing. I really feel like that's the same for what we do in this realm. I think if we ever get to the point where we feel like we know everything, A, we shouldn't be here anymore because that means, in my belief, you've already ascended and you should be gone. Like if you feel like you've known everything. And B, you're lying to yourself. Because we only have our perspectives. I mean, we have our world and luckily for many people their world is changing and they're understanding and seeing a lot more, but even just our culture. You and I are from different coasts, but we're also both Americans. And it's funny because I'm in a mastermind with a lot of UK people and we'll be saying words or we'll be, talking about something. I'll be like, what? And then the other person will be like, what? And it's so important to understand perspective and so important to learn. And even the way we approach animal communication and we approach each reading is got to be from a place of learning. I still learn something from each animal that I give a reading for or spend time with, and I'm so grateful for that because it helps the next animal. And I think if we approach it as, oh, yep, I'm a professional animal communicator, I know everything, you're closing yourself off to the gifts that that animal has to offer. So I think that's a great point that we're always learning. And I never want to stop learning. I am definitely who says it that, a student mind. I think there's a great saying out there, a great quote that you always approach life as with student mind. And
Mhm.
I think that's really, really valuable. So
And
I am a vegan, but I do
I've
think
all
that's important.
I've also heard that you learn from teaching,
Yes.
which I think is very true, because now I am teaching animal communication and I learn from my students. And one thing I want everyone to know is that I believe anyone can do this. Anyone who has an interest and a desire to do animal communication can learn it. It's a matter of learning how to focus your mind, learning the steps of how to do it, and practicing. So I encourage people, if they have any interest, just take a class. That's what,
Yes.
that's what we did.
That's what we both did. And I think it's gifts that we're born with. And and it's stuff, but it's kind of like muscles that everybody is born with, but it's just you've got to kind of tend to those. And the way to first start, with like muscles is you go to the gym or you do an exercise class. You start an exercise class, and that's kind of how we do with animal communication.
Mm.
One thing I wanted to address, that was particularly big in my personal journey, and I think other people may relate to it, is that my grandmother, I come from a long line of Celtic and kind of spiritual people, if you will, that had certain spiritual gifts, but we haven't always honored them. And I grew up in, especially in my younger years, in a church. And we won't get into all of that, but I'll mention that that really did bring up some blocks for me, because even with mediumship, it's like, nope, that's not real. This is not really happening. And so I think there's a lot of bias or blocks that we kind of develop, or that we come from, that may be important to recognize in your journey, and that you may need to kind of see where you stand with some of that before you take a class, or even take a class and recognize that there's some blocks, or there's some stigmas that you may come into this with. Even just coming, like I said, from a scientific background, I'm 100% believe in physical therapy and medicine, but I don't believe that there's a period at the end of that sentence. I think, there's so much more to what makes us up, and what makes our animals up, and what makes our relationships up. And I think understanding each other is key to our partnership. And especially with horses, is kind of where my passion has been most recently, is our animals are so ready for us to recognize that spirituality and animal communication is not a taboo subject. It's not just, for those hippies in the 60s, or, some weird taboo thing. Our animals have known this whole time, and they're waiting for us to realize, okay, this is just part of the thing. If I go to the gym, my muscles are going to get better. If I'm able to communicate and understand my animal, our relationship will be better. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that, Denise.
Well, I love that analogy. I totally agree with that. And I also think that we come into this world as children being very intuitive. I mean, that's kind of all we know. And we are taught to analyze things, to overthink things. We're taught about religion. We're programmed by our parents to believe certain things or act a certain way. And so for me, it was changing that programming, realizing that anything was possible, and being open to that. So really, just like a muscle, we're going back to learning how to be intuitive like we were when we were young. And that's why I think everyone can do it. We all come into this world um, with any possibility, with having a unique, open imagination and perspective. And I think that our society kind of beats that out of you a little bit.
Oh, yes.
So, but I had kind of the same thing. I grew up in a church and religious, and this is something my parents don't understand at all. I it took a very, very long time before I told my parents that I was doing any of this. And I thought that would be a really hard step, and it was actually better than I expected. They still don't really get it, but um, they think it's interesting. So that's good. Um, but yeah, I want to encourage people to be open and try things. And I also want to point out that, like, I started doing this work with people,
Mm.
and I chose to focus at kind of choose the niche of working with animals. And that is partly because I just love animals. I feel a connection. I, like you, mostly like animals better than people. And so that made sense. But what we're actually doing and using our psychic abilities can be used in lots of different ways. I don't consider myself a medium, but I talk to animals who have passed or who are in spirit. And so even that is just the way. I don't like the title. I don't The title of calling myself a medium feels strange to me, but I still do that type of work. So I encourage people to try all different kinds of things, and just working on opening your intuition is a great start.
Yeah, I love that. I 100% agree with you on title. I still struggle to this day when people say, "What do you do?" I'm like, well, do you want the short version? Do you want the long version? Because, like you said, we have different things in our toolbox. We may not be considered exactly a medium, although I have communicated with people who've passed and animals who passed. I'm a physical therapist, but I use these toolbox, these other things in my or these other modalities. And I think, like you said, titles are difficult because intuition can come into play with so many things. And I think that's key for people to realize is that you don't have to say, okay, I'm going to be a professional psychic, whatever. You can still be an office worker in Nebraska and be able to develop your intuition and be able to have a deeper relationship with your animal. Animal communication classes, intuition classes are really for anyone. And I think that also really helps you to understand yourself, because that's been the other journey that I've been really on. Um, I'd like to use this one saying, but I want to preface it by saying that I'm not that I want to be really respectful of people in the who really do come out of the closet. But I'll mention that for me, my own version of coming out of the closet has been, accepting that this spiritual side, accepting that, okay, I am intuitive, I am an animal, I am able to communicate with animals, and that's still okay. And just it really even helps me to understand our bodies even better, is being able to honor that intuition. So that's why I say it's a long way of saying I think anybody who has even the slightest intuition, or if you are connected with animals, or if you are just curious, is important to explore it.
Absolutely. And I would like to mention that I do have some classes scheduled for starting in January. I'm going to do a workshop and a 4-week course. And that does cover just some general intuition exercise and getting in touch with that. But there's more information on my website at intuitivedenise.com. And Mary Beth and I will be working on some classes together in the
Yes.
future.
Yep. Those will be announced soon. And also in the spring, I'll be talking about an animal communication class and a Reiki class that we'll be talking about. Before we go, I just wanted to mention one other quick thing, because I do think it was really important. I loved how you talked about the fact that some people or more animal communicators feel like you can't eat meat and you have to be, just a certain stereotype. I'm a plant-based athlete. For the most part, I do eat some, do cheat every now and then. But I chose that because that's right for me, for my body. And I think that's also really important, and why Denise and I also feel like being down to earth and just being present is so important, because you can communicate with animals, you can develop your intuition, you can come to our classes, and there is no stereotype. There is no prerequisites. You can have a hamburger if you feel like that's right for your body right before you come to class. We don't ask anything, and I don't believe anything is required to kind of go into it. I think the biggest thing and what you really do take out of intuition is learning what's right for you and honoring that.
Absolutely. And I was told, oh, you shouldn't have caffeine. You can only do readings if you get enough sleep. And just through my own experience, I've thought, when I first started, I remember trying to be very strict about, things I put in my body, things that I listened to. And I realized, I'd have a bad night's sleep and not feel that great. And I still talk to animals that day. So we have to let go of some of our limiting beliefs as
Yes.
well. And that's something that through doing classes, you can try things, trial and error, and figure out what works for you. And I fully support, as being a teacher, I would support someone through that process of figuring it out.
Yeah, yeah, because honoring yourself and your journey is what's key.
Hmm.
So, and like I said, I think the best way that I'll just end my story is that's really where I am today, and where I feel like, what animal communication journey has helped me is just honoring the journey and honoring where I am and who I am. And kind of using this path as both helping animals, but also really discovering who I am at my core. So that's what I'm excited about this journey.
I love that. And for me too, through all of this, it's become listening to my own intuition and quitting my job to do animal communication full time was a huge deal. But I really felt like deep down, my intuition was saying, this is the time you need to do this. And so I have learned a lot about myself and how to listen, and I really do feel like I've found my purpose in life. My purpose is to give animals a voice and to help improve their lives. And it took it took 40 years for me to figure that out. So that's another thing, is that I people are constantly looking for their purpose. And I was always talking about it. What's my purpose? What am I doing here? And so I hopefully will be able to help other people figure that out, now that I've kind of gone through that whole process. So
Yeah.
there's lots of layers going on with getting into your spiritual world and testing out your intuition.
Exactly, but it's so worth it. Like you said, it's taken 40 years for me too. Even when I graduated, from school, I always felt like I was kind of along my purpose, but not into my purpose. And it's because things take time. Our journeys are the way that they're supposed to be. But if any of you guys are curious about starting your journey, please be on the lookout. I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to email either one of us or just comment below if you're interested in one of our courses. And we'll post here on when they'll be starting. So thank you so much.